What if the very thing you're holding onto right now is the exact thing keeping you stuck? What if the anxiety, the overthinking, the emotional exhaustion isn't coming from your circumstances, but from your refusal to release them? Some of you are tired, not because life is overwhelmingly hard, but because you are trying to control what only God can handle. You keep replaying the same thoughts on a loop. You keep trying to fix what refuses to change. You keep gripping something that God has already asked you to release. And somewhere deep inside, you already know this. This message is for that moment of knowing. Because learning how to let go and trust God is not about losing something that matters to you. It's about finally placing it into the hands of the one who never loses control. Let's be honest with each other. Most of us don't actually struggle with trusting God in theory. We struggle with losing control in practice. We want clarity before we commit. We want timelines before we step forward. We want guarantees before we believe. But God does not operate according to our need for certainty. And that is precisely where the tension lives, because faith, by its very nature, means walking forward without seeing the entire path laid out before you. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say understand first, then trust. It says trust even when you don't understand. It calls you to rely not on your own logic or your limited perspective, but on God's wisdom and guidance, even when that wisdom looks nothing like what you expected. Letting go begins the moment you accept this truth: you are not in control. But you are held by the one who is. And there is a profound difference between those two realities. One produces anxiety. The other produces peace. Sometimes the pain you're carrying isn't just from the situation itself. It's from how tightly you're holding on to something God is actively asking you to release. The relationship you keep trying to force back together. The door you keep returning to even though it's been shut. The outcome you've decided must happen your way, on your timeline, according to your plan. You've made it non-negotiable in your heart, even as God is trying to move you in a completely different direction. Here is the hard truth: when God is closing something and you keep forcing it back open, that is not perseverance. That is resistance. It is not faith, it is control wearing the mask of faith. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 6 says there is a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. Life has seasons. There is a time to hold on and a time to let go. Not everything is meant to stay forever, and wisdom is knowing the difference, knowing when to release what no longer belongs in your life. When you refuse to release what God is removing, you don't just lose your peace. You delay His plan. God cannot lead you into what's next if you remain anchored to what He has already ended. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness. Sometimes letting go is the most courageous act of obedience you will ever perform. Let's clear something up before we go any further. Trusting God does not mean you suddenly feel calm about everything. It does not mean fear disappears or that uncertainty vanishes. Even the strongest believers wrestle. Even the most faithful people experience moments where doubt creeps in and anxiety flares up. But trust is not the absence of fear. Trust is choosing faith in the presence of fear. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." That verse is not telling you that frightening things won't happen. It is telling you that you will never face them alone. God is with you, not just watching from a distance, but actively strengthening you, actively helping you, actively holding you steady in the middle of the storm. That means you can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel uncertain and still surrender. You can feel broken and still believe. You do not need to wait until you feel perfectly at peace before you trust God. You just need a willing heart. That is enough. That has always been enough. This is where many people get frustrated and give up on the process entirely. They think letting go is something you do once, one prayer, one moment of surrender, and then you're done. But in reality, letting go is something you will choose again and again. Every single day. Because your mind will keep trying to go back. Back to worry. Back to control. Back to the endless cycle of what if. That is why Jesus said in Matthew 6 verse 34, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Each day has enough trouble of its own. He wasn't being dismissive of your concerns. He was redirecting your focus. Focusing too much on tomorrow only adds stress to today. Today is where you live. Today is where you surrender. Today is where you trust. This is daily surrender, not, once everything makes sense, surrender. Not, when I finally feel ready, surrender. Right now, today, in this moment, you release what you cannot control and you trust God with what comes next. And then you do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. And it gets easier, not because the circumstances change, but because your grip loosens and your trust deepens over time. Let's make this practical, because letting go can sound abstract until you understand what it actually requires of you day to day. Letting go does not mean you stop caring about the outcome. It means you stop forcing the outcome. You stop chasing what God is removing. You stop pushing against doors He has already closed. You stop building plans around a future He has not confirmed. Instead, you shift your posture. From control to trust. From anxiety to surrender. From striving to stillness. From white-knuckling your way through every situation to opening your hands and saying, "God, I give this to you." 1 Peter 5 verse 7 says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." Notice the word used there. Cast. Not hold on to loosely. Not manage carefully. Not carry slowly toward God over time. Cast. That is an active, decisive, intentional release. It sounds like this: God, I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust you. God, this hurts more than I can express, but I release it to you. God, I wanted a completely different outcome, but I believe you see things I cannot. That is what letting go sounds like. Not a performance of perfection. Just the honest, daily act of surrender. This may be one of the most difficult truths to accept, especially in the middle of pain. When something doesn't work out the way we planned, our instinct is to frame it as a loss. We grieve it. We resent it. We fight against it. But what if the thing you are desperately trying to hold on to is the very thing God is trying to protect you from? What if His no is actually a shield and not a punishment? Romans 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." Not some things. Not the pleasant things. Not the things that already make sense to you. All things. Even the closed doors. Even the painful delays. Even the crushing disappointments. Even the prayers that seem to go unanswered. God is working through every single situation, good or bad, comfortable or devastating, for a greater purpose in the lives of those who love Him. Nothing in your life is wasted. Not a single season, not a single struggle, not a single loss. God sees what you cannot see. And sometimes the most loving thing He can do for you is remove what you were holding onto as if your life depended on it. Sometimes His silence is wisdom. Sometimes His no is mercy. And trusting Him means believing that even when you don't. Many people are waiting to feel peace before they let go. But that is not how it works. Peace is not the prerequisite for surrender, it is the result of it. You will not feel peace first and then decide to trust God. The peace comes when you finally release the pressure, when you stop trying to manage everything on your own, when you place it into God's hands and leave it there. Philippians 4 verses 6-7 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Notice the sequence. First, you bring it to God. First, you release it in prayer. First, you surrender it with thanksgiving. Then peace comes, not because everything has been fixed, but because you are no longer carrying it alone. Pray about everything. Worry about nothing. And God will give you a peace that surpasses anything the human mind can manufacture on its own. If you are struggling to let go right now, if there is something in your life you keep circling back to, keep trying to control, keep holding on to even as it's pulling you under, this is your reminder. You do not have to figure everything out. You do not have to force what isn't working. You do not have to carry what God never asked you to carry in the first place. Let go. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Trust God. Not because you understand everything, but because He does. And sometimes the very moment you finally release it, the moment your hands open and your heart surrenders, is the exact moment God begins to move.